Okay, Nolan Wells update. A TikTok user uncovers an even darker secret. That's the title. And I need you to understand something before we start. This is not a surface level video. What you're about to hear goes deep. We're talking about contradictory witness statements, missing body parts in an autopsy, a wiped phone, a sealed state investigation, and a mother being targeted for asking questions. This case has layers, and we're going to walk through every single one of them. So if you're here, be here. Because once this starts, you're not going to want to stop.
I told y'all that Jax was the ringleader. I told y'all. He sat in this interview and he was telling stories about shit that he wasn't even there to witness. So let's break down some of the stuff that I heard in this interview. Let's start with Warren's first phone call, because y'all will remember that Warren said that he was over at Ava's house for that 4th of July party when they all started realizing that Nolan was missing, and he called Miss Christine at 11 o'clock.
One of the first things I told Miss Christine Wells in the first phone call that ever occurred with anything to do with Nolan Wells being gone, because I was the first person to call Miss Christine about anything. First phone call, anything to do with Nolan Wells was me making a phone call to Christine Wells. And one of the first things I said to her, with multiple witnesses here, pull up the phone call if you want. She said, oh, well, Nolan's location is with y'all at, where the house we were at. And I was like, well, no, he left his phone with us. I told her this.
And yesterday, the same time that this interview came out, Christine Wells said this.
360 says that he's on land, and he was like, well, no, I mean, well, we have his phone.
So both versions of the story say that Warren didn't tell her about the phone until after she confronted him with the 360. Now, Warren tells Miss Christine that he knows somebody in the Coast Guard and that he's going to call them, which is very fucking different than calling the Coast Guard, which absolutely explains why the Coast Guard came out and said at first that they had not received a call from the kids that night. The Coast Guard's initial statement said they weren't informed until 12:30. Then the Coast Guard later changed their story and said, oh wait, actually we did. And it seems to me that that first call was most likely an off the record to a friend kind of deal, which means these people freaked out and didn't call the Coast Guard until after all these people showed up at Jax's house. Which would explain why in the course of this interview it went from Warren called the Coast Guard to we did. Now when the subject turns to how the family got the phone back from these boys, you'll notice that there was a couple slip-ups.
Warren, you weren't at the house, and so you weren't there when they came to get the phone and all that. So
now remember, Warren just said that he wasn't at the house when the phone was got. And then Morgan talks about getting a phone call from one of the people in Christine Wells' group.
And how did they get the phone back?
So I got a call from a kid we went to high school with. He called me just asking me questions. He saw people posting on Snapchat, like the picture that was circulating.
Except this picture wasn't posted until July 5th. So how could this picture have been circulating on Snapchat that night? But let's continue.
And he called and he was asking questions. He was like, where's Nolan? When's the last time y'all seen him? And then he was like, so where are y'all at? And I told him, I said, we're at Jax's house. And then Warren got on the phone, and I don't know.
So they come to my house, right? And they kind of
Hold on, before we get there, was it confrontational or was it just just trying to find? It was confrontational already.
Wouldn't y'all agree?
Yeah,
he was 110%.
He was very
confrontational.
And when did was this on the night of the 4th or the next day?
This was the night when this was before they came and got the phone.
So this is the night of the 4th, yes.
You guys are missing a part of the story. How did you get from Ava's house to Jax's house? Because Miss Christine is watching you guys on the Life 360. So suddenly she's seeing the phone leave one location and go to another. Of course I would be upset. And now all of a sudden Warren is there when the phone stuff starts happening? He's listening to the phone call? Now I need y'all to remember that Warren also said that the phone was in his truck on the first conversation, as we have from this report. Meaning if we were to believe Warren that he was not there when everybody showed up looking for the phone at some time in between 11 and 1 a.m., so then that would mean after they heard this angry phone call, Warren gets the phone out of his vehicle and puts it in Jack's house and then leaves.
There's probably like 10, 15 people in my house I don't even know. And they're all up in our faces, going crazy, asking where Nolan is, and we don't know. And finally they get into Wyatt's face, and they're like, where's your boat? where's the boat at?
Demanding his address.
Demanding his address and stuff like that. And he finally ends up giving it to him. We give them the phone. They have the phone at this point. Then they get the address to his house. Then they go to his house. And they're searching all over his boat, what I heard and stuff like that. Well, anyways, I don't really know much about that, but they come back to my house at around 1 o'clock in the morning.
We called law enforcement. I was with Wyatt at the time. After we left Jax's house that night, I was with Wyatt, and one person we were with saw that their location was actually headed towards Wyatt's house. And so Wyatt got on the phone with 911 and was like, hey, these people are on the way to my house or already at my house. My mom and my dad are there alone, and they know nothing about this. But Wyatt's mom actually, when they were looking at the boat, they were actually walking from the boat, and she came out and started talking to them.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Wyatt, Morgan, and Jax were all together. Warren was gone for some reason at this point. 10 to 15 people just barge into your house. Don't know why your grandparents weren't around. That might explain some things, huh? Guess y'all had the house all to your fucking self that weekend. But then they ask Wyatt for his address so that they can go look at the boat. Wyatt gives them the address. They start heading over there. Wyatt and Morgan get into a car and leave Jax's house. Somebody else that you were with that we aren't hearing about is tracking someone else's phone. I don't know if it was somebody who was with the group that they had access to, or if they were tracking Nolan's phone and they saw it was heading to Wyatt's house. And even though Wyatt gave them the address, and instead of calling his parents, he calls 911 and tells them, my parents don't know anything about that's going on. Can you send police over there? Now, mind you, it was about half an hour after being on the phone with Warren that Christine was able to actually call and report him missing. But she was having to go back and forth and go down to all these different agencies because nobody would fucking help her. And frankly, I want to know why all of this confrontation was left out of the fucking report. Like, if this family had to be removed from 2 different properties by the police, why is there no record of that? And in fact, it wasn't until after these confrontations that MDMR and Ocean Springs Police apparently had their little conversations about who was going to be taking over the case. Because remember, the Jackson County Sheriff Lieutenant told them that deputies had spoken with several friends that had traveled to the island on the vessel with Nolan, and that when they were left, he was in the company of an unknown female. So now, even though Warren had supposedly called the Coast Guard, all these family members are telling the police that the kid is missing. These are the people that last saw them. They're all like, we last saw him on the island. Still, the deputies said that they did not have reason to believe that there was any water-related exigencies or emergencies. Don't worry, y'all. I've got a lot fucking more to say about this stuff because Warren fucked up pretty badly in this interview, and I'll show you why.
An 18-year-old kid goes to an island with his friends on the 4th of July. His friends come back. He doesn't. 2 days later, his body is pulled from the water. And from the moment this story went public, nothing about it has added up. Here's what the friends said. Here's what the girl's family said. And here's why both versions cannot be true at the same time. The friends told law enforcement a clear story. They said Nolan was deep in conversation with Katie McCormack. They said they told him to get on the boat. They said he waved them off, told them to go ahead without him, said he'd find his own way back. That was their account. That's what they gave investigators. And if that's true, then Katie McCormack knew Nolan was staying. She would have known he wasn't getting on that boat. She would have known he was choosing to remain on the island with her. That's the only way the friend's story works. Okay, hold that. Now here's what Katie McCormack's family said. Her sister Gracie gave a very different account. According to Gracie, Katie believed Nolan was leaving. Katie thought he was getting back on the boat with his friends. And Gracie said something specific. She said Katie assumed the friends who were telling Nolan to get on the boat wouldn't have left him behind. Read that again in your head. Katie assumed they wouldn't leave him. That means Katie didn't think Nolan chose to stay. That means nobody told Katie he's staying with you. That means from Katie's perspective, Nolan was supposed to be on that boat. So now you've got 2 versions. Version 1, the friends say Nolan chose to stay with Katie. Version 2, Katie's family says Katie thought Nolan was leaving with his friends. These aren't slightly different. These aren't a matter of perspective. These are mutually exclusive. If Nolan told his friends he was staying with Katie, Katie would have known about it. If Katie didn't know about it, then Nolan never said it. And if Nolan never said it, then why did the friends leave without him? Attorney Ben Crump is representing the Wells family. And he didn't dance around this. He laid it out plainly. He said the young lady's account says Nolan was getting on the boat. The boys say Nolan told them to leave him. And then Crump said 5 words that cut right through everything. Somebody must not be telling the truth. That's not an accusation. That's arithmetic. 2 opposite statements. 1 situation. Somebody's version is wrong. Now, here's what that contradiction opens up. We already know the timeline has a gap. But when you layer this contradiction on top of it, the gap gets heavier. Because if Nolan didn't choose to stay, then what actually happened between 3 p.m. and when that boat pulled away? If Katie thought he was leaving, and his friends say he told them not to wait, then who made the decision to leave Nolan on that island? Was it Nolan, or was it someone else? And whoever made that call, are they telling the truth about it? 90 minutes. No witnesses. No answers. Now watch this, because this next detail changed the entire tone of the public conversation. When the friends got back to shore, they had Nolan's phone. They had his keys, his phone, his keys, both in their possession, not on the island with Nolan, not left behind in a rush, with them on the mainland. Now think about that. If Nolan chose to stay behind, if he waved his friends off and said, go ahead, why didn't he keep his phone? Why didn't he keep his keys? You're on a remote island, no cell towers, no buildings, and you voluntarily hand over your phone and your keys to the people leaving? What would you have left? Reverend Al Sharpton raised this directly. At Nolan's funeral, in front of the family, in front of the cameras. He questioned why the friends had taken Nolan's phone and keys and then failed to report him missing to police. That's not a social media rumor. That was said publicly, on the record, at the young man's funeral. And it's a question that still doesn't have a clear answer. Now, here's the timeline on the missing person report. Nolan was reported missing the evening of July 4th, not by the friends who left him. His family raised the alarm. His body wasn't found until July 6th. That's 2 full days. 2 days on a barrier island with no shelter. No fresh water. No way to communicate. 2 days before a search located his body in the water. And while investigators were still trying to piece together what happened that day, the internet was already moving. Social media users started going through every photo and video from Horn Island on the 4th. They were tagging people, identifying faces, building timelines from posts and stories and geotags, and one name kept surfacing: Bart Edmiston Jr., 21 years old. He played high school football with Nolan. He was on Horn Island that day. And some listeners claim his name can be heard spoken in the background of the sea tow call. That claim hasn't been verified, but it didn't matter. The internet had already locked on, and Bart Edmiston became the most talked about name in this case overnight. Now here's the thing about Bart Edmiston. His family came out swinging. His attorney made strong, specific claims, and law enforcement has taken the online targeting of him very seriously. But when you look at what the audio engineer actually found in that recording, and when you hear what a forensic expert said about the digital fingerprint of the file, the story gets a lot more complicated. The sea tow recording, a routine distress call about a sinking boat, or, depending on who you ask, something that was recorded right in the middle of something much worse. We already know the call was placed around 4 p.m. We already know what some people say they hear on it. But what we haven't done yet is break down what's actually on the raw recording. Not the enhanced version, not the viral clips, the original call. So let's do that. The caller reaches the sea tow dispatcher. He asks for help getting the boat towed back to shore. Standard request. Boat taking on water. Need a tow. But when the dispatcher asks for membership information, the boat operator struggles to answer. He can't provide it clearly. There's noise in the background. There's tension on the line. And at one point during the call, someone on that boat yells, "Shut the fuck up." That part is not disputed. It's not enhanced. It's not interpreted. You can hear it clearly on the original recording. Shut the f on a call about a sinking boat. Now, does that prove anything? No. People yell when they're panicking. People snap under pressure. But it does tell you one thing. There was conflict on that boat. Something was happening beyond just water coming in. Now let's talk about the enhanced version, because that's what blew this case wide open online. We mentioned audio engineer Janetta Brantley cleaned up the recording. TMZ then released that enhanced version, and it reached millions of people within days. We've covered what some listeners say they heard at the 12-second mark, but that's not the only thing people pulled from this audio. In other parts of the call, listeners say they can hear someone say, "Nolan." Others claim they hear, "Check his chest," and "Wake up." None of these phrases have been officially confirmed, but when millions of people listen to the same audio, and a significant number of them hear the same words, you can't just wave that away. Even if there's an explanation for it. And there is an explanation. At least one expert thinks so. A digital forensics expert named Robert Freed analyzed both recordings, the original and the TMZ version, side by side, and his conclusions pushed back hard. Freed said he could not corroborate the claims TMZ made about the audio. He did not hear the same phrases after comparing both versions independently. But then he found something else, something that raised a completely different set of questions. The TMZ version of the recording is 20 seconds longer than the original. 20 seconds. And it carries a different digital fingerprint. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what that means, a digital fingerprint is essentially the file's identity. If you copy an audio file without altering it, the fingerprint stays the same. If the fingerprint changes, something was done to the file. That doesn't automatically mean tampering. Enhancement itself can alter a fingerprint. Editing can alter it. Converting the format can alter it. But 20 extra seconds of audio that weren't in the original, combined with a mismatched fingerprint, that is something investigators would need to address. Where did those 20 seconds come from? What's in them? And who added them? Freed also explained something important about how human hearing works. He said once someone tells you what to listen for, your brain starts finding it, even if it's not there. This isn't speculation. It's a documented phenomenon in cognitive science. Auditory pareidolia. Your mind fills in patterns where none exist, especially in distorted or noisy audio. Freed admitted that when he first heard what others claimed was in the recording, his own mind started going there too, before he analyzed it forensically. That's how powerful the effect is. So where does that leave us? Honestly, in a difficult place. The raw audio captures real chaos. Someone yelling, "Shut up." A boat in distress. A tense and disorganized scene. That much is fact. The enhanced version, with the specific phrases millions of people latched onto, cannot be confirmed forensically at this time. But it also can't be fully dismissed, because the 20-second discrepancy hasn't been explained. And the digital fingerprint mismatch hasn't been addressed. The audio sits in a gray zone, real enough to demand scrutiny, unverified enough to prevent conclusions, and that gray zone is exactly where the public debate exploded. Now, nobody got hit harder by that explosion than Bart Edmiston Jr. We already know social media put his name in the center of this case, but here's how his side responded. His family released a detailed public statement. Not vague, not defensive, specific. They said Bart sat down for interviews with investigators. He answered every question asked of him. He allowed law enforcement to view his phone, voluntarily. No warrant, no attorney present at the time. He handed over photos and videos from that day. He let them inspect his boat. He let them pull data from his GPS device. All of it, willingly. His family also says Bart put together a witness list on his own, more than 20 people across 2 separate boats who they say can confirm one thing. Bart helped a vessel in distress near Horn Island. That's what they say he was doing. Helping. His attorney Russell Latino went on record, and his statement was direct. He said, and I'm paraphrasing closely, Bart Edmiston Jr. did not kill or in any way contribute to the death of Nolan Wells. He had no motive. All he did was help a boat that was in trouble. That is the legal position of his counsel, clear and on the record. But the internet didn't stop, and Bart's attorney took action. He sent a cease and desist letter to a social media figure named Kimbra Lee. The letter accused her of pushing false and defamatory statements across her platforms. The specific allegation was that Lee falsely claimed Edmiston helped cause Nolan's death and participated in a cover-up. According to the letter, those statements were made publicly, repeatedly, and without evidence. And the consequences were real. Bart Edmiston received a credible death threat, not a vague online comment. A credible threat that triggered a law enforcement response. The FBI got involved, state investigators got involved, local law enforcement got involved, all activated because of what was being said online. And then there was the photo. A picture started circulating on social media showing Bart with a young woman. Users immediately tried to identify her as Katie McCormack. The implication was obvious. If Bart knew Katie, and Katie was with Nolan, then maybe there was a motive. Bart's attorney addressed it directly. He confirmed the photo is real. It does show Bart with a young woman, but he says the woman is not Katie McCormack. He says the photo is old, and as of now, no investigator has publicly confirmed or denied who the woman in the photo is. So the photo remains unverified, floating online, fueling theories, but proving nothing. Right here, this is the exact moment this case splits in 2 directions. One track points at the audio, the other track points at the body, and what they found in that autopsy, or more accurately, what they didn't find, is what took this case from a tragedy to something investigators cannot explain. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now, because what's coming in Chapter 4 is the detail most outlets buried, the detail that matters more than the audio, more than the photo, more than anything said online. Hit subscribe. The audio is contested. The photo is disputed. But there is one thing about this case that nobody can explain. Not the state, not the independent pathologist, not the attorneys on either side, and it involves the part of Nolan's body that was missing when the second autopsy began. When the independent pathologist received Nolan Wells's body, part of it was missing, not misplaced, not delayed in transit, gone. Let's talk about how that second autopsy even happened. Because someone had to pay for it. Someone had to fight for it. And the person who stepped up was former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick. Kaepernick covered the cost of an independent autopsy for a family that needed answers the system wasn't giving them. Nolan's body was transported over 800 miles, from Mississippi to Washington, D.C. That journey alone takes time. And time after death is evidence. By the time the body reached the independent pathologist, Dr. Mitchell, significant decomposition had already occurred. Decomposition changes what a pathologist can and cannot determine. It narrows the window. It closes doors. And in this case, it closed some of them permanently. But decomposition wasn't the only problem. When Dr. Mitchell began his examination, he inventoried what was there. Standard procedure. You document what you receive. And what he found was that specific structures were absent. The trachea, the laryngeal cartilage, the thyroid horn, the hyoid bone. All of those structures make up the throat. They weren't delayed. They weren't in a separate container. They simply weren't there. Now, for anyone who doesn't immediately recognize why that matters, let me be direct. Those are the exact structures a pathologist examines when they're trying to determine if someone was strangled, choked, or had their airway compressed by force. The throat tissue is the first thing you look at in that scenario. It's not one of several things. It is the thing, and it was gone. Dr. Mitchell has experience as a chief medical examiner. This wasn't his first case. He knew the protocol. When a pathologist retains tissue from a prior examination, especially throat tissue, it's usually because there's concern about neck injury. So Mitchell assumed Mississippi's examiner had kept the structures for that reason. A reasonable professional assumption. He reached out expecting to receive them. They never came. He never got them. So what does a pathologist do when the critical tissue is absent? He documents what that absence means, and Dr. Mitchell was clear. Without the throat structures present for examination, he could not confirm or rule out neck injuries as a cause or contributor to Nolan Wells' death. Now stop right there. Because that forensic distinction matters enormously, he did not say neck injuries occurred. He said he could not rule them out. Those are not the same statement. One is a conclusion, the other is an open door. And in a death that is officially undetermined, an open door is everything. But the missing throat wasn't the only finding that raised questions. During the examination, Dr. Mitchell performed a posterior head and neck dissection, and in the deep soft tissue overlaying the occipital bone, the back of the skull, he found something, a focal area of red discoloration, 12 inches by 8 inches. Let me give you a frame of reference. 12 by 8 inches is roughly the size of a standard piece of paper, at the back of an 18-year-old's skull, in the deep tissue, beneath the skin. Dr. Mitchell documented the cause of this finding as unclear, not consistent with impact, not consistent with decomposition artifact, not consistent with anything he could definitively explain, just unclear. There was no laceration of the skin above it, no fracture of the skull beneath it, just a significant area of unexplained discoloration sitting in the tissue at the back of his head. And because decomposition had already progressed, Dr. Mitchell could not determine whether surface bruising had ever been present on the skin. Whatever caused that discoloration may never be explained. Now, Mississippi completed its own state autopsy. That examination happened first, before the body was released, before it was transported 800 miles, before Dr. Mitchell ever saw it. And here's the thing about those state findings. Nobody has seen them. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner completed the autopsy. The results are sealed. They will remain sealed until they are presented to a grand jury. The Wells family cannot access them. The attorneys cannot access them. The public cannot access them. And the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office has not publicly confirmed whether it retained the throat tissue or offered any explanation for why those structures were absent when the body reached Dr. Mitchell. No statement, no clarification, nothing. And then there's the question of where the body was found. We know it was recovered at the northwest tip of Horn Island. But here's what analysts reviewing this case have noted. That location does not align with typical tidal displacement patterns. Under normal water movement conditions, the body should not have ended up there. The currents don't support it. The drift patterns don't support it. If the body moved naturally through the water, the northwest tip is not where it should have gone, which leaves two possibilities. Either the water moved in an unusual way that analysts haven't been able to account for, or the body didn't get there on its own. Neither of those options has been resolved. Now let's talk about the investigation itself, because the scale of this is significant. Investigators have interviewed approximately 60 witnesses. 60. That's not a small circle of people. That's a wide, thorough net of interviews across everyone connected to that day. The FBI is actively involved, assisting with the examination of digital evidence, federal-level involvement, on what is still officially an undetermined death. And with all of that, 60 witnesses interviewed, FBI engaged, no public conclusions, no arrests, no charges. The official cause and manner of Nolan Wells' death remains undetermined. So Nolan's mother, Christine Wells Wansley, decided not to wait. She went looking for the answers the system hasn't produced. She issued legal subpoenas to 6 major platforms: Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Life360, Snapchat, TikTok. The subpoenas request a specific and detailed range of information: usernames, IP addresses, GPS data, metadata, direct messages, photos, videos, friend list history. She is building her own evidentiary trail through the legal system, one subpoena at a time. And shortly after she started making noise about it, an anonymous complaint was filed against her nursing license, a professional complaint against a grieving mother who is asking questions about her dead son, filed anonymously, a sealed autopsy, a missing throat, a body in the wrong location, and a mother being targeted the moment she started asking questions. That last part, the targeting, isn't random. It fits a pattern. Here's something that doesn't happen in normal cases. A grieving mother starts asking questions, and within weeks, someone files a complaint against her nursing license, anonymously. That is not a coincidence. That is a message. Let's be specific about what happened. The Mississippi Board of Nursing received an anonymous complaint against Christine Wells Wansley, a formal complaint through official channels, targeting her professional license. The board opened an investigation, and at the same time the complaint was filed, coordinated one-star reviews started appearing, directed at her workplace, not organic reviews, coordinated. Attorney Ben Crump addressed this directly. He called it a warning shot. His position was that this was intimidation, a deliberate effort to make Christine Wells Wansley stop talking, stop pushing, stop filing subpoenas and demanding answers. The message being sent was clear. Keep going and we'll come after what you've built. The Board of Nursing eventually closed the investigation. No action taken against her license. But that's almost not the point. The point is that someone tried. Someone took the time to identify her profession, locate the right regulatory body, file a formal complaint, and do it all without leaving a name. That kind of effort doesn't come from a stranger. That comes from someone who knows who she is and wants her quiet. Now here's another detail that hasn't gotten enough attention. More than a month after Nolan's body was recovered, 2 of the friends believed to have been on Horn Island with him went back. They returned to the island, not alone, with their attorneys. Their legal teams described this as an independent investigation effort, their attempt to reconstruct what happened. But think about the optics of that for a moment. 2 people who were present the day Nolan disappeared, whose accounts are at the center of a contradiction this entire case is built around, went back to that location with lawyers and have offered no public explanation of what they were looking for or what they found. And then there's the context this case sits inside. Because this isn't just a story about one island and one day. When photos from Horn Island on the 4th of July spread across social media, people noticed something immediately. Nolan Wells was black, the friends he was with were white, and the case was unfolding in Mississippi. That combination ignited something much larger than a missing persons investigation. Questions about the history of racial violence in Mississippi surfaced almost immediately, not as background noise, as a direct lens through which millions of people were watching this case. Reverend Al Sharpton got involved. Attorney Ben Crump got involved. Colin Kaepernick got involved. Not casually, not just with public statements, with action. Kaepernick funded the independent Autopsy. Crump is actively representing the Wells family in pursuing answers. Sharpton spoke at Nolan's funeral. These are people who show up when they believe something systemic is at work. Their presence alone signals how seriously the broader community is taking this, and none of them have walked away. So where does the official investigation actually stand right now? District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath has been consistent on one point. All evidence in this case will remain sealed until it is placed before a grand jury. That position hasn't changed. A grand jury presentation is expected, but no date has been publicly set. No timeline. No indication of how close or how far away that moment is. Now, a grand jury is not a trial. It doesn't determine guilt. It doesn't convict anyone. What it does is decide whether the evidence is sufficient to bring formal criminal charges if the grand jury reviews what's been collected, the sealed state autopsy, the 60 witness interviews, the digital evidence the FBI has been examining, the GPS data, the phone records, all of it laid out in front of them, and they return an indictment, someone gets charged. If they don't, this case could go cold, with no accountability, no charges, no answers, and a family left holding nothing. That is the weight of what that grand jury decision carries. Everything, every piece of evidence, every interview, every subpoena Christine filed herself, all of it flows into that room. And what comes out of that room determines everything. Christine Wells Wansley has not slowed down. She said something that needs to be heard plainly. She said, and I'm quoting her closely, that she's doing this because she would hope any parent would fight for their child to find out what happened. That's not rage. That's not performance. That's a mother who made a decision. She decided she was not going to let this go quiet. And she has backed that decision with legal action, with public pressure, and with the kind of sustained focus that cases like this require. The subpoenas are filed, the attorneys are working, the pressure is building, and every day that grand jury hasn't convened is another day the answers stay buried. Here's where this stands. An 18-year-old went to an island with friends. He didn't come back. His phone was wiped. His throat was missing from the autopsy. The official cause of death is still undetermined. The state's findings are sealed, and the people who were with him that day have said very little. The grand jury is coming, and when it does, we will be here. Every development, every piece of evidence, every update as it breaks, right here on DAV Crime Records. This case is not over. The grand jury hasn't spoken. The sealed autopsy hasn't been released, and Nolan Wells' mother is still fighting. Subscribe to DAV Crime Records right now, because when this breaks, you need to already be in the room.